FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and lots happened here. The market collapsed, fought back a little bit. Where it's going to go, well, we probably hit the peak, but we haven't hit the peak yet on coronavirus fears, phobias, panics, and we haven't hit the peak yet on Joe Biden's lack of mental acuity. Who better to talk about it than our good friend Bill Whittle, and you find him at billwhittle.com. And any questions? When
it comes to lack of mental acuity, I am absolutely the person who you want to go to for expert opinion.
Well, hey, neither of us are trained health professionals, but look, we've all had relatives. We've all had relatives in assisted living, in nursing homes, and wearing, adult diapers. Let's face it, that's just what happens when you live long enough, often. And Joe Biden needs assisted living at the very least, doesn't he?
He does. As it turns out, I have some personal experience with this as well. My mother went through this. I talk about her in the past tense. She's still alive, but she really hasn't been my mom for almost 10 years now, I want to say. So Joe is always kind of prone to gaffes, and gaffes are gaffes. But clearly, certainly for the last several years, these memory lapses and inability to finish sentences have been getting more and more pronounced, and now they're very pronounced. But there's something else on the scene now, Kerry, something really much, much different. The way that this disease progressed with my mother was that you develop Alzheimer's, and then you develop a subset of this called dementia. And from just speaking from personal experience, the Alzheimer's is frustrating. The dementia is heartbreaking. When you have to explain something to somebody 7 or 8 times an hour, that can be frustrating. But when people who've always been kind and gentle start screaming words that you didn't even think they knew at the top of their lungs, that is soul destroying. And in the case of Joe Biden, who's always sold himself as friendly old Joe, regular old Joe, the kind of guy who could put his arm around anybody in any room and make a Democrat out of him. When he starts, telling union members to F off, and when he starts saying, "Hey, fat," and dog-faced pony soldier, or whatever other little 1912 aphorisms he wants to use, what Joe Biden is doing is he is losing the only thing he has, which is kind of this nice guy appeal. And for people who think that, well, maybe, this will be all right, it's like he's not going to get any better. He's going to get worse. He'll be worse by the convention, and he'll be worse by the general election. And often this kind of thing happens the way that bankruptcy happens, slowly at first and then very quickly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm in Florida here. Literally, I'm looking out my window now. I can see this assisted living nursing home complex. 2-3 times a week, I see 3-4 police cars go there because these people get violent. And like you said, they're the nicest people, gentle, everything else. But when they lose it, they really lose it. And you see ambulances there. This is a regular ongoing occurrence. When I see him get angry and start fighting with voters, like he was always a bit of a wacko, buffoon. I never thought he was particularly bright, but he had some kind of elemental working class charm that he used. And now, like you said, he doesn't even have that. He's attacking the very people he needs to elect him. Look, I believed from the get-go. Now, initially, I thought they would bring it to a brokered convention. Nobody would have enough delegates. And then the person they really wanted, the elite, they would choose him. But Bernie got too much power too quickly. He caught on. They went into a full-scale panic, so they made Pete Buttigeg drop out. Then they made Klobuchar drop out, and both endorse Biden. And obviously, they were promised something. They forced Warren to stay in to sabotage Bernie.
Siphon some Bernie votes, yeah.
They forced her to do that. There's no question, because then she dropped out right after Super Tuesday because they didn't give her what she wanted. Maybe she was looking for Secretary of the Treasury, God forbid. So all of this was orchestrated to get Biden in there.
We could have put her in charge of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. That would have been appropriate.
Yeah, that would have been great. The Bureau of Indigenous Peoples, she'd be great for that. But then, she drops out and she's really angry. You could see she was really, really angry. And so Biden's the presumptive nominee now, and they're going to take him out because it's obvious to the world, even though the media penalizes people on social media for observing the obvious. Like Bill, you said, you've got this experience. It's heartbreaking. You don't want to see anybody go through it, but you certainly don't want to see that person become president of the United States. And the Democrats have to know that when he gets up there on the stage with Trump, calling him a lying, dog-faced pony soldier is probably not going to win him any debates.
I have disagreed with Joe Biden's policies for as long as I've been able to think about policies. And after the 2012 vice presidential debate with Paul Ryan, I no longer felt any affection for him at all. I thought his behavior during that debate showed me an awful lot about who he was. And from that point on, I pretty much despised him. He certainly has not risen in popularity in my book, but even Joe Biden doesn't deserve this. And it says an awful lot about the Democratic Party leadership that they're going to take a guy who has been such a stalwart for them and basically run him to ruin in front of the public eye, just as their only chance to grab power, that they're going to allow Joe Biden's decline. Not only going to allow it, they're going to insist upon it being a public spectacle, a public event. And that leads me to feel a sense of genuine pity for Joe. I think the situation is pathetic, and I don't mean it in the cynical way. I mean it in its original meaning. It makes me feel sympathy for this guy who I completely disagree with, who I do not like in the slightest, who I think would be terribly bad for the country. But what's being done to him it's certainly immoral. And that tells you more about the Democratic Party leadership and their morality than just about anything I've seen, including the character assassination attempts on Neil Gorsuch and this whole impeachment thing. These are people who have no concern for individual human life whatsoever, including one of their own. And they're going to trot Joe Biden out and hope that he can keep sentences together long enough to get through the convention. I think I agree with you that I think, well, first of all, to be honest with you, Kerry, I think their plans are changing on a daily basis as Joe continues to decline. I agree with your initial assessment. Now the assessment is if he can just limp to the convention, they'll get to spring a kind of a surprise vice presidential candidate that'll get everybody all razzed up. But I don't think he's going to survive to the convention as a person who can stand on a stage and complete a sentence. And if they decide to continue with this travesty, I actually think that Donald Trump would do the right thing and also the politically smart thing. If Donald Trump was on a debate stage with Joe Biden, I think you would watch. I think you would be literally able to see Donald Trump intentionally backing off from kicking a guy who's that far down.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he'd be expressing pity and sympathy more than anything else. Look, the other thing that this illustrates is Bernie Sanders. How serious was his campaign? How much did he want to win? Because he never seized on Biden's obvious corruption, the whole Burisma thing and Hunter Biden and everything else, and 30 years of corruption. He never once seized upon it. And he never, at least subtly, brought Biden's mental acuity up as an issue, which really, I think it's a disservice to the country and to the party not to bring it up. So two key points he conceded on before even thinking about him, kind of like what he did with Hillary during 2016 when he said, I heard enough about your damn email server already, which really, so he just throws away that issue that really he could have ridden to the nomination, but he didn't do it.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Arcana Corporation is on the verge of bringing the world's highest grade silver mine into production. The Revenue Virginius mine in Colorado has proven improbable silver reserves grading nearly 37 ounces per ton silver, with an all-in sustaining production cost of only US $8 per ounce of silver. The mine is fully permitted with infrastructure already in place, and the company has announced they plan to commence production in 2020. Achieving successful production usually results in a significant upward share price re-rating on the Lassonde curve. Arcana trades under the ticker AUN in Toronto and AUNFF in New York. To learn more, go to arcana.com. That's AURCANA.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Yeah, my colleague Steve Green pointed this out in so many words. He said Bernie doesn't want to win, and that's the evidence. The 2016 evidence where he had the actual dagger, he had the item that hurt that cost Hillary Clinton the election, and he not only did he not use it, he made a point of handing it to her hilt first, in front of everybody, and then in 2020, the opportunities he's had to really score as if you wanted to win, he's not only botched. He simply has walked away from. And I thought about it when Steve first mentioned it, that Bernie doesn't want to win. And then almost immediately, Kerry, I kind of thought to myself, well, of course he doesn't want to win. Why would he want to win? Being president involves work. You have to actually go to work if you're president. The perfect life for Bernie Sanders is to be on the perpetual campaign. He gets the adulation of crowds. He gets to stand up in front of young people. He gets to sign autographs. He gets millions of dollars, 3 homes, as every good socialist should have, and all of this. And at the same time, he doesn't have to work. What benefit would he have as president? He talks about his policies, but he can't tell you what they cost or why. Bernie Sanders is a protester. He's not a politician, and the shallowness of his support is so evident now, not just among Democratic voters relative to Biden, but among his own voters relative to 2016. It's clear to many people that he's not serious about winning, and furthermore, thing I've been seeing this primary campaign is that Democrats love to talk about socialism as long as there's no danger of actually getting it. But when Bernie started to do as well as he did in the initial stages, I think the entire Democratic Party, I don't think this is a mystery, I'm certainly not breaking the news, suddenly woke up and said, oh my God, we're in danger of actually nominating an actual socialist. And not only are we going to get creamed politically, but he's going to take our money.
Yeah. I was calling him Bernie McGovern, because you and I were around. Remember when McGovern became the nominee, and it was through a real strange series of events because Edwin Muskie had his Howard Dean moment. He broke down in public, started crying.
Yep.
He was finished. Then McGovern picked the guy who'd been in and out of mental hospitals his adult life, Eagleton. Yep. He finally wound up with Sergeant Shriver, which was a Kennedy in disguise.
Yep.
But the thing was, there were really people, Bill, who believed that McGovern was going to win. Just like today, if you ever watch The Hill and Crystal Ball, she really believed that Bernie was going to win, or that guy Cenk Uygur, another crazy progressive. They believed in Bernie. They believed in his policies. Jimmy Dore, another one, if you ever watch him. They all were believers in this guy. And it was like being a believer in Avenatti. It was the same deal.
I'm fairly sure it was Pauline Kael. You probably know this better than I do. But during one of the 2 Nixon elections, I don't remember if it was 68 or 72. It was probably, I'm almost positive it was 72. And I'm pretty sure it was Pauline Kael, the critic from New York. But it might have been somebody else. In any event, it was somebody like that, who the day after Nixon's enormous landslide win over McGovern in 72, came to the office, found people crying, and basically said, I can't believe Nixon won. Nobody I know voted for him. And that's it in a nutshell. And look, buddy, this kind of thing goes bigger than just politics. The Tet Offensive in 1968 was a catastrophe, military catastrophe for North Vietnam, and they launched it because they were convinced that if they were to do something of that magnitude, the people of South Vietnam would rise up against their capitalist oppressors and join the communist cause. We had the same exact situation during the Bay of Pigs invasion, when we were convinced that if people who had had fled the Castro regime would return to Cuban soil. The Cuban people would rally behind them and overthrow this communist. You might want to do a little bit of intelligence work before you launch that kind of a military action. And in fact, in the Bay of Pigs, we did. We sent CIA agents in there, and they came back and said, we can't find a single person who's not an enthusiastic backer of Fidel Castro. So the entire premise was flawed, and they knew it going into it, but they went into it anyway.
Yeah, it's like Dr. Johnson said, about second marriages, the triumph of hope over experience, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We won't even talk about third marriages.
No, that's exactly right. And they genuinely believe that the American people want these things, and they can't understand why they don't get it. And I've been looking at the big picture for quite a long time now, including things like Star Wars and video games, and looking real wide. The young socialists did not come out and vote for Bernie. People were worried that socialism would take over America. Bernie didn't just beat America. Bernie didn't even beat Trump. Bernie couldn't beat Joe Biden. He couldn't beat Joe Biden. Socialism lost to Joe Biden in America. And that's something that should give us all a great deal of comfort. It didn't even get out of the primaries. It got smashed. His own people didn't show up and vote for him. And I have a theory about this, by the way. And my theory is that for the young millennials that are Bernie's base of support, the vocal millennials, large numbers of them simply did not come out and vote for him. And I have a theory about this, and my theory is that socialism is not a political thing for them. It's a status symbol. It's like a $250 pair of sneakers. It's a generation that has been raised with participation trophies, where whether you get the same trophy whether you win or lose, so long as you show up, you get the same trophy win or lose, has never really understood that just simply saying you're for something means it's going to happen. They did not show up, but to the degree that they say I'm a Bernie supporter means they felt like they showed up. They didn't win because they didn't have any desire or any knowledge how to win. But there are stories of I read an in-depth article about the Democratic Socialists of America, and all these 15 or 20 of these avowed communists going to go watch the Bernie Biden debate at the sports bar or something. And 3-4 minutes into the debate, everybody's texting everybody else, and they're going on Instagram. They're not even paying attention to what's being said over there. They're not serious people. Yeah. Thank God.
So true. So true. And you see the whole climate change thing was their reason for being, among other things, because we only have 10 and a half years left, I think.
Oh, it's less than that. Yeah. In fact, it's already too late. Al Gore told us in 2005 that we only had 10 years. And Rush Limbaugh, who is the genius and the master of us all, started his Planet Earth death clock the second that movie came out, and it was a 10-year countdown, and it expired in 2015, and still here we are.
Yeah. So these, Bernie was just a hippie left over from the 60s that never quite burned out on acid and knew how to position himself as an opportunist just in the right place at the right time to move ahead. And, and in Vermont, I mean, that was easy. He couldn't have done it in New York City, obviously, but Vermont, a lot of slackers, and he managed to build his brand up there. But his brand turned out to really not stand for anything, certainly not winning. And if it's one thing Americans really hate, it's not just somebody who loses, but somebody who never tries to win. We hate that more than anything.
Absolutely right.
It's un-American. Yeah. It is.
It is un-American and suits him perfectly. It's a perfect ending for an un-American campaign to give up a fight that you could have won because you just didn't want to do the work.
Yeah, and he just had to grow a set. I understand his health isn't great either. He wouldn't have been the candidate. That's the thing. None of these people who were up on that stage were real candidates, serious candidates, in my opinion. When Trump ran, and they always compare it to 16, Trump running, well, nobody thought he was going to win. He was up against, Scott Walker was a serious candidate.
Yep.
Whether
Jeb
you
Bush.
love or hate Jeb, he was a serious candidate.
Ted Cruz.
Yeah, they all were. None of these people, Pete, I call him Pete Butt Plug, but you have to forgive my profanity there.
It's a clown rodeo.
Yeah. Elizabeth Warren, what's her name? Kamala Harris, Corey Cory Booker. None of these were serious, real candidates. They were all there just to dilute the field, because whomever they want to put in there eventually is a person who could never win in the primary to get the nomination. That's the key to me. And who that person is, I don't know, but it's somebody.
Well, here's what's really kind of interesting. I certainly agree with everything you say, and I don't think Donald Trump's going to have any trouble beating anybody. And the reason I say that is I think there's only one way Donald Trump could lose this election, and that would be for Republicans to assume that there's no way that Donald Trump could lose this election. Yeah. And that's not happening. This impeachment thing, they're on fire to go out and get revenge. So I feel pretty good about that. But here's something to think about. There have been two elections in modern history where the left went all the way left. It was McGovern in 1972, and it was Mondale in 84, where they really just basically said the reason we didn't beat Reagan is we weren't liberal enough, and the reason we didn't beat Nixon is we weren't liberal enough. So we're seeing a repeat of this. But what seems to me to be different this time is the Democrats don't have a bench. There's no bench.
Yeah.
I mean, their front runners, the three front runners, the finalists, were all in their 70s, and there's no up and comers there that look like they can carry the load. Buttigeg is a lightweight. Everybody can tell he'd probably make a really nice, high school principal or something, but nobody particularly thinks he's going to be able to handle a nuclear crisis. Nobody wants to be lectured to by Professor Elizabeth Warren, about privilege and race and so on. So here's the question. What happens on the first Wednesday of November if Trump shellacks these people, and I suspect he's going to? When they took a shellacking in 72 and in 84, it took them a cycle to really get back on it. But pretty soon they had Jimmy Carter, and then they had Bill Clinton, who was enormously successful because he ran in the middle and ran as an American.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen this time. And I got to tell you, they can't win without the Bernie people. And that demographic becomes larger every day for the Democrats. The people who are going to vote for Biden, he's going to be the nominee. That demographic's getting smaller. And so I don't think anybody's looking forward to Bernie 2024. I don't think there's anybody out there who's really thinking like this is going to be his chance.
Oh, God.
So what happens? It's possible. In fact, it's starting to look likely to me that what may happen in November and after Trump gets reelected, if he gets reelected, is that the Democrats may face the same kind of crisis as the Whigs did and realize that their party is split down the middle and that there is no way for either half of this to win. And that probably what would happen would be they would spin off something like a Socialist Party of America, and that would leave the remaining Democrats no choice but to become Republicans, especially if Republicans go easy on the ideology and basically say, hey, our ideology is we get government out of your life as much as we possibly can, and go with the big tent. It really could be the end of the Democrats.
Yeah, it very well could be. It seems likely. They've been having this meltdown, and I go back to 2016 to the convention, the nominating convention, where they totally marginalized and pushed out Bernie's voters. And really, there was violence at that, and the media portrayed it as a perfect convention, whereas the Republicans, who really did rally behind Trump, rally around him, and it had the drama. It was perfectly orchestrated. They said was a failure. But the Democrat one, which the first day, if you remember, the emails got leaked and it was all downhill from there. Debbie Wasserman Schultz had to resign as head of the party. And then you got Donna Brazile, and it was a nightmare. I just remember watching it, and the media is like, oh, everybody loves each other. So this is a party that's definitely headed for oblivion. I think the Whig Party is an excellent analogy to it. I don't know who comes along because they need a central figure to unite them. That person doesn't appear to exist. The Clintons aren't going to do it. The Obamas can't do it. There's nobody there. Like you said, their backbench is really shallow. So I think they're kind of toast. Hey, just wanted to bring up the coronavirus. So it's serious. I don't downplay that it's serious, especially if you're in a vulnerable segment of the population with a compromised immune system, elderly, diabetes, whatever. But for the rest of the world, the panic here, Bill, is Is this totally a media creation, what we're witnessing?
Well, the media certainly is the carrier, but the virus is fear. And the reason that this fear is so overwhelming, really paradoxically, is due to our success in terms of containing infectious diseases. If you look at what happened to this country during yellow fever outbreaks in 1793 and 1878, when people were 40% of the population just dropping like flies, bodies stacked, nobody's being buried, this kind of thing. If you compare it to that, it's a sneeze, if you'll pardon the expression. It's nothing like an existential threat. It is nothing like the plague or the pestilence. But I really do believe, honestly, that humanity has a biological, built-in, hardwired fear of pestilence. That is a primary fear of humans. You can avoid war, you can even walk away from famine, but pestilence has scared the living daylights out of us and has killed more humans than anything else combined. And people have a natural fear of it. And since we don't have any outbreaks of real infectious diseases to measure it against, people are really panicking. And I think what's happening is people look at the Ebola outbreak of several years ago. Now, I know a little bit about these things. Ebola is a terrible disease. It has very high mortality, but it's not easy to catch. You have to physically touch somebody's blood who's got Ebola, and you have to have a cut in your skin as well. So Ebola is a disease that can, in fact, be contained and quarantined. And the R sub naught number for Ebola is just under 1. That's the number of if one person has Ebola, how many people are they likely to affect? And in Ebola, it was maybe one other person. That's containable. The flu and COVID-19 seems to be around 3 or 4. Measles is something like 12. So what I think is happening is people are watching this virus escape because it's going to. It has. There's no. You can't. Once an entire country has it, it's out. It's not going to go away. You can't contain it. And what I think is happening is they're seeing the spread of this virus, and in their mind, they're equating this with the spread of Ebola. That this is a plague that has gotten loose.
Right.
And this is where I think there's been a failure to communicate honestly with people by saying, yes, this is not the flu. This is worse than the flu. This is not something you should just ignore or shrug off. But likewise, it is not a scythe that's going to go through the population. And the argument I've been making has been, since it's an airborne influenza variation, which is so contagious, once it's out, it's out. And my argument has been, we should be thinking, rather than building a wall around the virus, we need to be building a wall around the people who are really susceptible to genuine harm from the virus.
Great point.
That's where our resources should go. And when people go and hoard toilet paper and hand sanitizers, that's one thing. But if we don't make it clear what the actual threat to healthy people is, my great concern is going to be that in about somewhere around 40 or 50 days. I've heard that we're about 50 days behind China and maybe 11 days behind Italy. When significant numbers of people start becoming sick with this COVID-19, the medical evidence seems to indicate that virtually every healthy person is going to be told, go home, have some NyQuil, drink plenty of fluids, relax, and it's going to be equivalent to a serious flu. But if people are panicking, and if every time somebody develops those symptoms and immediately demands to go to the emergency room and be tested for this and get intensive care right away, then what's going to happen is that lack of knowledge and that panic is going to cost us the lives of many people who could have been saved, who are at risk for this virus, but didn't get the care they wanted because people who didn't need to be there have overloaded the medical system through sheer ignorance or emotional immaturity.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the fear that's been implanted, people are acting like it is the Black Death. And we're kind of like, when we learn about the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, the thing that they teach most about is the plague,
right?
Really, of all the topics there, and then we had the Renaissance. It's kind of like that, and that's why we call it the Dark Ages. So I totally agree with you. But one thing is, it seems that geographic relationship, hotter climates. If you look at the map of the country and everybody that has it, and states that don't. The states with the most are generally in the north, not all of them, and the states in the south have many less cases, which seems to support the proposition that, as we know, it's very rare for somebody to ever get the flu in the summer, and sunlight is the best disinfectant. We get more sunlight in the spring and summer, and less airborne diseases. I mean, this is a fact.
Correct.
So it's probably going to be this way, but we don't know for sure.
It appears to be a mirror image of yellow fever, which predominantly struck the South because yellow fever is spread by mosquitoes, and northern climates are too cold for mosquitoes, and they didn't suffer anything like the South did. Yes, my wife is Russian, and she's been here for 3.5 years now. And she said when she was living in Moscow, she got the flu every month, sometimes twice a month, every month for the entire flu season, 7-8 months out of the year. And she hasn't been sick once since she's been in California. So there's no question, I think, that flu is more infectious in northern climates because people. Well, one of the things about northern climates in winter is you do have large numbers of people congregating indoors, and it's nice and warm and all the rest of it. I thought my Siberian-born wife would be much more cold resistant than I am. Turns out she's not. She grew up in 80-degree temperature her entire life, heated indoors. I grew up in Florida. My indoor temperatures were 70 degrees. So right. It's weird like that. But yes, it is a serious problem, but we need to face it like adults. And one of the things that adults do as they grow out of being children is they learn what to be afraid of. They learn that the things that you're not afraid of when you're a child are things you should be afraid of, and things that you are afraid of as a child you shouldn't be afraid of. And no one's saying, I'm certainly not saying we shouldn't be afraid of this virus, but we should understand what the threat of the virus is so that we put the appropriate fear in the appropriate places. Not only not let it destroy our lives and the economy in the process, and make sure that we're able to act to protect the people who are in fact at risk and minimize the damage of this particular disease by understanding what this thing is and is not.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that was China's biggest mistake as a totalitarian regime. No transparency, did not share the information with the public, and effectively stoked a panic that shut the entire economy down. Maybe it's starting to come back now. I don't know. It appears that it might be, because it appears to have peaked. And if you can believe them, it appears that all the ad hoc critical treatment centers that they set up in Wuhan have been shut down now. There were 14 of them. I assume that that's true. I'm not sure. So we know that this thing is going to peak, and then it's going to diminish. And by next year, if it comes around again, there will be a vaccine for it. And you'll have the opportunity, if you're in a threatened segment of the population, to take it. So this panic just blows my mind. I see it on my YouTube channel.
Yep.
People are saying that, and I see these fear mongers on YouTube. Look, it's serious, but it's much more serious from the standpoint of the economic harm that it's inflicting, and the possibility that, look, we just saw Lebanon default on their debt, dozens more countries with airlines shut down, cruise ships shut down. I mean, I'm looking for coronavirus travel specials, to save money.
You get a lot of them. I think you're absolutely right. We're going to see this particular variant of the flu, and it is nastier. It is more virulent. It has higher mortality than flu bugs. It's not the flu. It's not like a bad flu. It's worse than that. But by this time next year, by flu virus time starts in the fall, we will have a vaccine for COVID-19. And then probably the year after that, it will be blended into our seasonal flu vaccines, which when you go down and get a flu vaccine, it changes every year, because every year there are different strains of the flu. The flu is not only contagious, the flu is a real problem. And COVID-19 falls into this category because it mutates so quickly, your immune system can't recognize it. You have to constantly be introduced to the new disguise that it's wearing for that particular year, the fashion that it's in. And then it will join that and so on. American people are going to die as a result of this disease. And I think the biggest problem is perspective and scale. And this is what happens when you count the hits, but you not only don't count the misses, no one's reporting on the number of people who've recovered from this disease. So that's counting the hits and ignoring the misses. But furthermore, you're just counting the hits and you're not counting any of the other hits. If there was a running total of the number of people who died from type 2 diabetes starting in the beginning of February, and we watched that number climb, then we would have some perspective. If what people should be doing in order to get a handle on this is there should be, let's just say for the sake of the argument that the coronavirus started as a factor on February 1st. Let's just say, in fact, let's say January 1st, nice even number, January 1st, 2020. All we're seeing are reports of the death toll that's increasing, and now it's 2,000, it's past 3,000, now it's past SARS and so on. Okay, this is data, and it's important data. But I think that data should be accompanied by, while 2,000 people have died of coronavirus worldwide, 23,000 have died of malaria, 622,000 have died of heart disease, and all of this so that it gives us the perspective to manage the risk. Everything's a risk. And as you point out, we have overweighed the risk-reward equation by not knowing enough about this particular illness. And the one thing we found decades after the last pandemic in the United States, which was the influenza virus of pretty much 100 years ago, exactly 1919, 1920. Right. One thing we found after the fact, from a non-biological point of view, was we found in retrospect, after interviewing people who went through it, especially the worst cases of it, was that the thing that caused people to be the most afraid was when the government would say, don't worry, there's nothing to worry about, we've got it under control. Because their eyes are giving them evidence to the contrary. San Francisco, strangely enough, was one of the few cities that actively, openly told their people what it was, how serious it was, what you could do to avoid it, and their infection rate was noticeably lower. And, I got to tell you, and I don't want to be misunderstood about this. So many people take things out of context, and I have two relatives who are at serious risk with this virus, and I don't mean to sound flip about this at all, but I have to tell you, if you wanted my opinion of what's going to stop the fear epidemic, is I think people are going to get bored with it. Yeah. And what I mean by that is they're going to live in this state of extreme anxiety. And then another week or two is going to go by, and they're not going to see what they're expecting to see. They're not going to see bodies stacked like cordwood in the parking lot at Home Depot. And then they're going to you can't maintain this level of hysteria without evidence of it. If people were dropping dead in the streets out there, and I walked out to my car and there were 15 dead bodies, between here and the next block.
Yeah, and ambulances all over.
A fear level like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, I just want to conclude with one thing. The media, this is a media enhanced event, not created. There's some basic truth there. It's enhanced. This goes back to War of the Worlds with Orson Welles. Mm-hmm. They told the people at the beginning of the show, this is fake, and people didn't hear it. They tuned in later. And the next thing you know, there's a massive panic because people really believe that there's little green men, aliens landing, Martians landing in New Jersey, of all places. Why they would pick New Jersey, and I grew up there, I don't understand. But for some reason, they came to New Jersey. And then what happened is, we were just kidding. And then they got into real trouble. But the media learned something from that. And that is that they can create panics. And the key is not to come out and say that panic was fake. It's to come up with the next panic and the next panic, and to keep people panicked and therefore dependent upon the government and the media for their information and their savior. And it's just, they've mastered it. This is the natural outcome of War of the Worlds. Wasn't it Grover's Mill? I want to say. Yeah. That's right. I don't even know where that is. I grew up in northern New Jersey, but so think about this. People went into mass hysteria over War of the Worlds when every half hour the broadcast said the following is a work of fiction and drama. It is not a real event. They were so prone to panic. They were so willing to believe in it that they ignored those warnings. And certainly we're not seeing those warnings in front of today's news broadcast. It's not like every single news broadcast we see starts out with,
this is what you're about to hear is the worst case scenario, and this is a collection of every single negative data point without any positive data points. We now continue with our scheduled programming. They're not getting that. You're right, and they're able to generate this kind of panic as a result of it. And when you hear people saying things like, well, this is what's going to finally bring down Donald Trump, you really have to wonder about the moral makeup. Well, I don't believe there's a moral makeup to people like that. I was not a fan of Barack Obama, to say the very least. I fought pretty much everything he did for 8 years as to the best of my ability. But if I found myself wishing for Americans to die of a plague in order to damage Barack Obama politically, I would say I'm a member of the wrong party, and I need to do some serious soul searching if that's what it has driven me to.
Yeah, same here, because really, and to want a massive depression, economic dislocation, where people do kill themselves when they fall upon hard times, and marriages break up, families are broken, and kids are really injured and damaged by that. To wish for that, like a Bill Maher, is really reprehensible and should be roundly condemned. Hey, one other thing I just want to cover is you got people like AOC, Ilhan Omar, all these people. The Republicans have allowed this because they should have ejected people like Maxine Waters from Congress years ago, but instead they allow them to keep staying in power and building power and allowing this as acceptable behavior. And then they paved the way for an AOC. I mean, when are we ever going to get some leadership that really enforces proper decorum and behavior in Congress?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Trilogy Metals is a world-class developer in Alaska's Ambler mining district. The company already possesses 8 billion pounds of copper, 3 billion pounds of zinc, over 1 million gold equivalent ounces, and now over 77 million pounds of cobalt. Trilogy's Arctic project boasts an after-tax net present value of $1.4 billion with a 33% IRR. Trilogy is led by an experienced management team with proven success in discovering and developing projects in Alaska. The company is well capitalized, has no debt, and possesses strong institutional support. Trilogy trades on the New York and Toronto exchanges under the ticker symbol TMQ. To learn more, go to trilogymetals.com. That's trilogymetals.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, I have two things to say about that. First of all, after the 2020 election, I think through private donations, not through public money at all, I think a large sum of money should be raised, and we should build a 100-foot tall golden statue of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And conservatives around the country should have to make an annual pilgrimage and get down and give thanks, because that woman is so stupid that she doesn't understand that she's not supposed to say what they really believe. She's only supposed to say what they think, what they want us to believe.
Yeah, what they want.
And as she continues to put markers out further and further to the left, the rest of the Democratic Party has followed her out onto this limb, to the point where I knew Donald Trump was going to win this election when, at the first stage of the Democratic debates, they asked, how many of you are in favor of Americans paying for free health care for illegal immigrants? And 11 put their hands up.
Yeah.
Okay, so that we owe that to AOC. And then as far as the decorum goes, I keep coming back to this. People have often raised the point of, if we fight dirty, then we become like the Democrats. And this is a very, very good point, and it's a point I don't agree with. And my guide for this is the experience of the U.S. Marine Corps in Guadalcanal. When we first fought the Japanese, there was a sneak attack on Pearl Harbor, but we fought them with a relative sense of decency. Wounded Japanese soldiers we sent out our corpsmen to, and it turned out they pull a grenade and blow up, and 3 of them. And the single great example of this was, there's a small island off of Guadalcanal that was abandoned by the Japanese, had a small Japanese garrison on it, I want to say 50, 60 people or something, and they were starving out there. They were simply starving, and one day they came out and waved a white flag, and a Marine said, Sarge, let me take a boat over there and we'll get these people, off that island, get them some food and stuff. They're waving the white flag. They've surrendered. So he took something like 12 Marines over there, landed on this little island, got out of the boat. The Japanese dropped the white flag, opened up with machine guns, killed everybody. And Marines who had the globe and anchor on their arm had that arm hacked off with samurai swords and stacked on the island. Now, after that point, the Marines did not treat the Japanese the same way that they treated surrendering Germans. They didn't treat surrendering SS the same way they treated surrendering Germans either. They understood that there are honorable enemies and we're an honorable people. And if you want to fight honorably, we're happy to do that. But they learned from quick experience that when you're fighting with people who have no honor and no ethics, at least as we understand it, your choices are either fight them on their level or lose. And for the Americans who had to fight that kind of dirty fight against the SS and against the Japanese, for them to come home and return to society as decent, generous, model people who were not permanently broken by this experience is an indication to me that we're going to have to fight them on the level they want to fight us. And that means, okay.
That's Donald Trump. That is Donald Trump. I hate to use that cliche over and over again. When Lincoln appointed Grant as general, and he's a drunk, he's an alcoholic, he's corrupt, blah 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 blah. Yes, but he fights.
I can't spare this man. He fights.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what the Trump phenomenon is.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily where we want to be, but it's where we have to be because lies have become the new truth. 2 + 2 = 5. And if we don't fight for truth, we fight for nothing.
We are in a culture war, and we're not dealing with bullets. We're dealing with stories and ideas and lies and so on. 3 days after Mitt Romney lost in 2012, I said the next president of the United States is going to be a Republican. He's going to come from the pop culture. I didn't mention Trump specifically because I had no idea it would be him, but I knew it would have to be somebody who knew how to manipulate the message and use the way that they are that this is a war of messages, and Donald Trump is a war president, and all of the people who are effective in wartime are not the kind of people that are effective in peacetime. Nobody wanted to have George Patton be the press secretary for Franklin Roosevelt. He would have simply been a catastrophe.
Or Churchill.
But George Patton's job was to go out there and kill Germans, and he was real good at that. And all of the war generals almost always see, in American culture anyway, whenever an American war begins, we start the war with political generals who are good at being nice and polite, and they have decorum and they act presidential and all the rest of it. And then very quickly we find out we have to call out the SOBs to do the actual fighting. And that's what's happened here. The American people had to call out an SOB to fight this battle because that's what we were reduced to.
Yeah.
And to the degree that people have a problem with Donald Trump's level of decorum, and there are times when I do myself, I'm right with you, man. I can't spare this man. He fights. He's the only guy that understands the rules of this conflict, and I am a staunch supporter of his and will continue to be throughout the second term that I expect he's going to get.
Yeah, and it's not just fighting for this country, which, hey, we live here, we love it, we want it to go on, we want to pass it on to our children. It's fighting for Western civilization. No other president, no other political leader in the world has ever stood up before, to my knowledge, in modern times. I mean, times that I've been alive, I guess I consider that modern, and said Western civilization is worth preserving and fighting for. He's the only one, Bill, who ever said it. To me, that might just be his biggest contribution. Anyway, we got to go. But make sure you go over to billwhittle.com. Any questions or comments, hey, send us an email, kl@kerrylutz.com, or post them on YouTube. We answer everything. Bill, can't thank you enough. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Always enjoy having you on.
Let's do it more often.
All right, you got it.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.